Chapter 1. The Crown You Didn't Choose. 1498. Spain to England. You are 14, and everything smells like oranges. The dress you wear today was sewn by 12 silent women who weren't allowed to speak unless spoken to. It itches around your wrists. The embroidery is gold thread, pulled so tightly it leaves the fabric puckered like your skin after tears. You are not allowed to cry today. You are a princess, and princesses are not children. They tell you this as they brush your hair until it pulls, as they fit the crown of your house upon your skull, not to honor you, but to transfer you. Your name is not yours anymore. From this morning forward, you are property. Not in the mud and blood way a peasant is owned. No, your chains are sewn with pearls, velvet bonds, gold shackles made of promises between men who have never bled on a wedding night. You ride in a carriage that smells like incense and fear. Outside, the bells of Granada ring with hollow celebration. People cheer, but not for you. They cheer for the union of empires, for treaties and trade routes, and the power that comes when two kingdoms merge over a girl's unformed spine. You want to be brave, but your ribs tremble. They said he was kind, tall, with strong calves. The Spanish ambassador even claimed he liked music. As if that matters when his seed will be planted in your body before you ever learn what it means to feel safe in your own bed. When you first saw a map, you thought the sea was painted blue for beauty. Now you know better. The sea is a wall of teeth. It separates you from your name, your tongue, your mother. You look down at your hands, still shaking, and wonder how a body this young could possibly carry the weight of 2 countries. Night falls on the ship. You don't sleep. The waves speak in a language older than prayer. Your chambermaid whispers that England is gray, that their kitchens stink of boiled meat, and their winters bite through silk. She braids her hair with trembling fingers and tells you stories of queens who never smiled again. You ask her softly, "Did they ever say no?" She pauses, and for the first time her voice flattens. No one asks a lamb if it agrees to slaughter. When you arrive, the port is full of men. Not one of them looks at your face. They look at your carriage, your dowry, your hips. You are led through stone corridors like livestock on velvet hooves. The tapestries show women kneeling, women holding heirs, women dying in childbirth. You wonder if there are any tapestries of women who ran. There aren't. The wedding is fast. No vows of love, no laughter, just cold hands placing rings like weights. You try to smile when he touches your chin. He smells like metal and power, not cruelty, something worse, indifference. You learn that indifference cuts deeper than rage. At the feast, you sit between two uncles you don't know. They toast to alliances. You try not to bleed through your dress. Your womb has become a national project. Later that night, you sit on the edge of a bed too large for one soul and too narrow for escape. He enters, removes his gloves, and says nothing. And as he takes what centuries of men have called his right, you close your eyes and leave your body. You drift above the room, above the castle, above the very idea of crowns and alliances as currency. And somewhere in that untethered space, a small voice in you whispers, "I do not consent." The voice is small, but it will echo for centuries. Chapter 2. The Queen of No Country, 1501 to 1530. Somewhere between England and exile. Your name is still embroidered on the linens, but no one says it aloud anymore. You are still queen, still wear the sigils, the rings, the royal colors that make your figure seem grander than it feels inside. But the court has begun to look through you, as if your skin is made of stained glass and your womb is full of dust. The people once cheered for your Spanish grace, your solemn strength. They sang songs of your piety, your beauty, your hope for sons. They do not sing anymore. They whisper. You sit alone in a hall built for banquets, with 14 chairs left empty around you like gravestones. Each one bears the name of a child who did not live. Miscarriages, stillbirths, breathless daughters, each more silent than the last. The one child who did survive, your daughter, is not enough. Not in this world, not in this dynasty, not for him. He walks the halls now with freer steps. He does not ask if you're cold. He does not look at the windows he ordered nailed shut so you wouldn't waste time dreaming. And the others, ladies, cardinals, scholars, follow him. They speak of annulment in the way one speaks of rot in an orchard, regretful, necessary. You are the tree. You are the rot. You are the fruitless branch that must be lopped for England's sake. They begin to erase you in stages. First, the music stops when you enter. Second, your portraits are moved into darker rooms. Third, your letters begin to vanish. You write to your nephew, the emperor of another empire. You write to the Pope, to your confessor. but the replies, if they come at all, are late and lined with sorrow. Power is not inherited through pain, not here, not now. The court jester says, queens who cannot breed must learn to read. He laughs. And you laugh too. Just once. Because it's true. So you begin. Not with philosophy, no. You cannot read Latin with speed, and the scholars mock you when you ask. But you find comfort in older books, books from other queens, from wives, from saints who bled quietly. You begin to copy lines, not for publication, not for scandal, for preservation. In a room with high windows, you build a hidden archive of grief. No one notices, no one checks. You are, after all, just a woman now. Just a woman. But there is one girl, a chambermaid with quick hands and tired eyes. She finds one of your pages tucked between linens, pressed with lavender, heavy with ink. She does not return it. She reads it and keeps it. She never tells you she did, but she begins to stand straighter in your presence. She begins to walk slower near the king. She begins to mouth the words she cannot yet say aloud. A crown does not justify a cage. You do not know her name. You do not ask. You cannot afford the cruelty of hope. But you see her reflection in the polished silver basin, and for the first time in weeks, you recognize a version of yourself that is still alive. Then they move you. They call it exile, but it's a gracious one, a country manor, a small retinue, enough food, enough fire, enough distance from politics. You are no longer queen. Chapter 3. The Girl Who Read Her Pain. 1536. Tudor England. The Royal Nursery. You are no one. A girl with rough hands and good posture. You work quietly. You speak only when addressed. You empty chamber pots, brush linens, slice fruit for mouths that never taste the sourness of your own tongue. But today, something shifts. You are cleaning the nursery. The air smells of milk gone wrong, of polished wood, of heat trapped behind stained glass suns. The queen is gone, escorted to the chapel for a silent mass after another disappointing night. You are alone. Until your rag touches the edge of something unexpected. A book, old, bound in leather, tucked beneath a cradle unused for years. It is not a Bible, nor a prayer book. It is something else. You open it, not out of defiance, out of accident, curiosity, hunger. The script inside is unfamiliar, Spanish maybe. Some passages are translated, margins scratched, some pages torn, but one phrase is circled over and over in different hands. A crown does not justify a cage. You read the words again. You sit down. You read more. The stories are short. They're not quite stories, more like memories, stacked like bones, wrapped in velvet. A queen describing her wedding night. A woman speaking to no one about a child who died unnamed. Sentences that trail off into silence, as if the page itself is mourning. You are only 13, but you understand grief when you see it. And you recognize something else too. This is not fiction. This is someone's life. Someone like you, but in silk, behind gold, with all the power of the world and none of the permission. You keep the book. You read it at night in the straw-itch dark of the servants' quarters. You hide it in a basket beneath apples. You memorize whole passages, whisper them to yourself while scrubbing floors. One morning you say it aloud. No one asks a lamb if it agrees to slaughter. The other maids stare at you. You smile, just a little. Something inside you has begun to move. Not fast, not loudly, but enough. One day the queen sees you. She does not usually look at your face. You are shadow, utility. But this time she does. You, she says, come. You follow her into a chamber heavy with tapestries and judgment. Her ladies retreat. She holds a letter. Her fingers tremble, not with fear, but with something closer to defeat. Can you read? She asks. You do not answer, because you are not supposed to. But you do. You nod. She hands you the letter. It is in French, thick, formal, cruel. An accusation. The queen has failed in her duty. Her husband considers replacement. Her womb, like her crown, is fragile. You read it aloud. Your voice doesn't shake. When you finish, she says nothing for a long time. Then, leave me. You go, but you leave the book behind. You tuck it under her pillow, soft as breath. You never speak of it again. Years pass. You marry a baker's son. Your hands do not soften. Your spine does not bend. You tell your daughters stories, not of fairies, but of queens who were not queens, of women who were crowned and caged, of rooms that echo even after the voices are gone. One of your daughters will leave England. She will marry into a French family of printers, and she will carry something in her bag, folded, brittle, pressed between a shirt and a dream. A single page from that book. Chapter 4. The Ink That Wasn't Allowed to Dry. 1664. Versailles, France. The court of Louis XIV. You were supposed to be born a boy. Your father never said it aloud, but you heard it anyway. In the way he stopped smiling when he spoke your name. In the silence after your mother mentioned books, in the heaviness of your lessons, dance, etiquette, embroidery, but never Latin. Now you serve at court. You pour wine for women in silks who call themselves lucky. You paint rouge onto cheeks already flushed with champagne and humiliation. You listen to gossip like others listen to church bells, often and with a tremor in your chest. But at night, you write. Not for publication, that would be ridiculous. You write because something inside you swells when you don't, because the ink calms your ribs, because the act of placing thoughts on paper feels more honest than any curtsy or prayer. Your words are hidden, folded, slipped beneath mattress corners and behind portraits of powdered queens who never blink. Until one night, the fire guttering low and the wind like fingers at the shutters, your brother brings you a gift, a page, old, torn, translated from English to French in a shaky hand. To be born into a crown is not to be born into power. It is to be born into expectation and sacrifice and silence. You reread it 3 times before you dare to breathe. The next morning, you ask your brother where he found it. He shrugs. It came wrapped around a bundle of typesetting ink from Rouen, strange paper, almost sacred. You don't tell him that it is sacred. You don't tell him that something in that line feels as if it was pulled from your own bones. Instead, you add it, quietly, lovingly, to a story you are writing, a fictional one, about a queen who cannot speak, though her eyes are full of thunder. You call her La Reine Silencieuse. Your story passes in whispers. A friend of a friend copies it. A lady-in-waiting reads it under candlelight. A noblewoman in mourning requests it on her deathbed. None of them know who wrote it. You are still no one. But the words, they begin to live without you. And in one salon, amid laughter and smoke, a philosopher leans forward and says, "If women can imagine freedom, they will one day demand it." The others scoff, but not all of them. One night, you are summoned, not to dance, not to serve, to read. A duchess, childless, sharp-eyed, quietly feared, asks you to recite your story aloud. You obey, though your voice shakes. She listens. When you finish, she does not smile. She only asks, "Did this queen exist?" You lie. No. She nods. Then she will. You leave Versailles 5 years later. You are not disgraced. You are simply forgotten. But you carry with you something greater than favor. Chapter 5. The Philosopher's Wife Who Refused to Stay Silent. 1778. London. The Age of Enlightenment. behind a closed door. You are not supposed to speak when guests arrive. That is Rule 1. You may pour the wine, adjust the candlelight, smile politely if spoken to, but you must not interrupt. Not even if the men misquote Aristotle. Not even if they laugh at Rousseau's claim that women are naturally subordinate. Not even if your husband, your brilliant, published, lauded husband, calls you his muse, while dismissing your opinion on property rights with the same hand he uses to pat your wrist. You smile, and you say nothing. But later that night, when the door closes and the candle sputters low, and he finally falls asleep, you write. The pen scratches like a blade. You copy quotes, then tear them apart. You draft arguments in margins. You respond to their logic with blood-warm memory. You write. They say reason is masculine. But what reason permits the burial of half the species beneath obedience? Your husband keeps his treatises locked in a cabinet lined with velvet. You keep yours beneath the loose stone in the hearth. Sometimes, when the fire burns just right, it warms the edges. You think that's fitting. The books you draw from are unexpected. A tattered French novella about a mute queen? A single English page with no author, just the phrase, "A crown does not justify a cage." It haunts you. You imagine the woman who wrote it. You imagine she was smarter than they allowed her to be. You imagine her voice folded up, buried beneath titles and alliances and the weight of royal linen. You imagine she burned. Your husband begins to suspect. "You're distracted," he says. You nod. He sees you reading by the window and warns you, "Too many ideas in a woman's head will turn her melancholy." You nod again. That night you write, "Melancholy is the appropriate reaction to confinement." You begin to teach local girls, quietly, cautiously. They come under the pretense of needlework. You hide pamphlets in sewing baskets. You read aloud under the sound of spinning wheels. You do not call it revolution. You call it memory. Because when you speak of the queen who bled alone, of the girl who read her pain, of the woman who dared to write without a name, they recognize something. Not the stories themselves, but the silence. They have heard it too. Then the news arrives. A woman in France, Olympe de Gouges, has published a declaration of the rights of woman. You read it in the cellar, shivering with excitement. There, in print, is your breath, your anger, your echo. She does not quote you, but she quotes someone who once quoted someone, who once folded a page inside a nursery that held a child who would never wear a crown. It is enough. You return upstairs. Your husband is holding court with guests. Someone mentions the hysteria in Paris. He jokes, "Let them shout, women make noise well enough." The men laugh. And, for the first time, you say, "And what if the noise isn't for you?" The room falls quiet. Your husband blinks. He will never strike you. He is too civilized. But he will never forget this moment, nor forgive it. You begin to publish, under a man's name, of course. The essays spread, slow, cautious. You write about domestic space, about the law, about inheritance. You call yourself a mirror, not a muse. Your work finds its way into salons, into France, into the... Chapter 6. The Printer's Daughter Who Asked Why. 1792, Paris. A press room beneath the barricades. You are not the one meant to touch the ink. Your father's hands are black with it. He says it stains too deep for girls, that your place is in the shop front, not the workshop, that good daughters sell pamphlets, they don't make them. But you are not a good daughter, not since the day you read one. You were 12. You snuck into the back room while they were all at supper. A pile of pages still warm from the press sat waiting. You picked one at random. The headline screamed like a cathedral bell. Déclaration des droits de la femme et de la citoyenne. You didn't understand every word, but you understood the fire behind them. You read them again the next morning, then again the day after, and soon you were no longer selling pamphlets. You were stealing them. By 15, you've memorized every word Olympe de Gouges ever wrote. By 16, you are helping set type when your father isn't looking. By 17, you discover a drawer in the back of the workshop, locked. You pick the lock. Inside, beneath old tax ledgers, is a small bundle of discolored pages. The ink is faded. The language awkward. The script handwritten, foreign. One line makes your hands tremble. A crown does not justify a cage. You don't know who wrote it, but you know it's real. You feel it in your throat like a prayer that was always half-formed. That night you copy it. You change nothing. You don't dare. But you add a note beneath it. This voice lives. Let it speak again. Then, against every rule, you set the type. Your father finds you the next morning, covered in ink, printing a single page that no one ordered. He raises a hand, but does not strike you. He sees your eyes, and he sighs. You'll burn for this. You answer, quietly. Then light the fire. The revolution is already boiling over. The streets chant, bleed, rise. They say liberty is being born, but no one asks if it will have a mother. You keep printing. You change the names on old texts. You resurrect forgotten quotes from nameless women. You reprint La Reine Silencieuse under the new title, The Queen Who Watched the Guillotine. It sells and scares them. You meet others, young women with ink under their nails, girls who dress as boys to attend university lectures, widows who recite Rousseau and then whisper, "But where was his wife when he wrote that?" You form a group. You meet in the dark. You collect banned texts, write your own. And always, always, you begin with the same line. A crown does not justify a cage. Some think it's a motto. Others think it's scripture. You never correct them, because you don't know either. You only know it's true. Then comes the trial. Not yours, Olymp's. They drag her through the streets like a warning. She stands tall, even as they shave her head. Her final words are printed hours after her death. If a woman can mount the scaffold, she should be allowed to mount the platform. You ink the phrase with shaking hands. You print 200 copies. You slip one under every door in your roundabout. You are 17. You are already too loud. One night, a soldier comes for your father. They say his press is subversive. Chapter 7. The Dollhouse That Burned. 1868. Norway. A parlor. A stage. A woman who leaves. You were given a dollhouse when you married. It stood no taller than your waist, carved of pale birch, with velvet chairs the size of thimbles, a porcelain fireplace that never burned. It was beautiful. It was delicate. It was meant to teach you something. Your husband said it with pride. Every girl deserves her own home. And you nodded, because that was what wives did. But even then, on your wedding night, something in you whispered, "Is it still your home if you can't open the front door?" Years passed. You smiled well. You entertained, sewed, laughed at the right jokes. You birthed children quietly and recovered quickly. You thanked your husband for the roof, the furniture, the air. But your lungs grew tight. It began with books. A package arrived one day, misdelivered maybe. It contained essays in English and French, handwritten, the ink uneven. You opened them without thinking, expecting letters, recipes, something benign. Instead, reason belongs to all who bleed. Even a silent queen dreams of a door that opens. No one asks a lamb if it agrees to slaughter. You sat in the hall, reading, not breathing. You didn't sleep that night. The next day, you copied the words, over and over. They became prayer, pulse, proof. You hid them beneath the dollhouse. It seemed fitting. Later, someone invited you to the theater. It was a new play, strange, modern, written by a man who, they said, had spent too much time around angry women. It was called a doll's house. You went, not expecting much, and you watched, stunned, as a woman named Nora laughed too brightly, pleased too perfectly, and finally stood up, shook off her role, and walked out. She left her home, her husband, her children. She left the dollhouse. And for the first time in your life, you cried in public. The play caused riots. Men said it was dangerous. Women said it was dishonest. Clergy called it blasphemous. But in salons and sewing circles, whispers passed like wildfire. Did you see her walk? Did you hear her say no? Did you feel her become real? You hosted your own reading. 5 women, 3 candles, 1 locked door. You read it aloud. Your voice cracked. Someone sobbed. Then you read the quote you'd found under the dollhouse. A crown does not justify a cage. No one knew who wrote it, but everyone nodded. One of those women, Sigrid, was a seamstress. She stitched the quote into linings of coats, into hems, into bonnets, into the world. Another, Liv, was a teacher. She began each term with a sentence written on the board. You are not less because they say so. And one, Marianne, was a printer's daughter. She recognized the ink, the cadence. She said, "My grandmother knew someone who printed that." You stared at her. Printed what? She pointed at your copy. The queen, the cage, the lamb, all of it. It wasn't legend. It was lineage. Years later, you visited a bookstore in Copenhagen. There, on a dusty shelf, you found a small, anonymous volume. The collected writings of she. Chapter 8. The Suffragette with Your Portrait. 1905. London. Smoke, banners, and a memory in a frame. You march with her face tied to a stick. Not your mother's, not your own, but hers, the woman in the portrait. Oval frame, cracked glass. She wears a crown and a dress that looks too heavy for her bones. Her hands are folded, but her eyes are not quiet. They stare like they remember pain that hasn't ended. No one knows who she is. Not really. Some say she was Spanish. Others say French. Some whisper she bled for a son who never lived. You found the image in a second-hand shop behind a row of musty encyclopedias. It was unlabeled, unsigned, just her, and a single torn scrap of paper taped to the back. A crown does not justify a cage. You didn't need more. You knew she was one of you. The boots of your sisters scuff the cobblestones. You walk in rhythm, not because you're told, but because it feels like the only way forward. Shoulder to shoulder, rib to rib, banners lifted high enough to blot out the church spires. One reads, "Votes for women." Another, "Am I not my own?" Yours is simpler, just the portrait and the line. Men shout from windows, some throw eggs, some laugh, some watch silently with the shame of recognition. The police wait at the edges. They have orders not to beat you too hard, not unless you push first, not unless you show teeth. But they fear the quiet ones more, the ones like you who walk without rage, who carry silence like a blade sharpened by generations. That night, in a jail cell too cold for grief, you sit with 8 other women. One is bleeding from the head. One is still singing. You unwrap your coat and show them the portrait. Someone gasps. "I've seen her," a woman says, "in a pamphlet long ago. My aunt had it, burned before I could read it." Another murmurs, "She's the queen who never spoke, isn't she?" You shake your head. "No, she spoke. We just didn't hear her yet." You tell them what little you know, that her words traveled through centuries, that her grief seeded pens, presses, fire. You recite the lines, one by one. Some cry, some stare. One begins to write them on the prison wall with a shard of porcelain from a broken cup. By morning, they filled the bricks. By morning, they're moved to separate cells. By morning, the wall is painted over in black. But it's too late. You've learned it. The silence only holds until it's repeated. You're released days later, bruised, hungry, unbroken. You take the portrait home, frame and all. You hang it over your writing desk, beside a quote from Wollstonecraft and a clipping of Olympe's trial notice. You begin your own pamphlet. Title, "The Inheritance of Pain, Voices from the Silent Half." You open with her words. To be born into expectation is to be born into war. And then you write your own. You do not ask for permission. You have waited too long. The pamphlet spreads. Chapter 9. The Room with a Locked Drawer. 1929. England. A study. A woman at a desk that isn't quite hers. You rent the room for 8 shillings a week. A corner of someone else's house. Tea at 5. Silence at 10. Curtains that never quite open all the way. But the room is yours. And the drawer? The drawer is locked. That's the agreement. The old woman downstairs said it kindly, as if she were asking you not to rearrange the flowers. That drawer was my husband's. It stays closed. There's nothing of use in it anyway. You nodded, but you wrote it down. Because you know, any drawer that must stay locked holds something worth unlocking. You are writing an essay, an impossible one. They asked you to speak on women and fiction. And so here you sit, with your tea, with your books, with your ghosts. You write, "A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction." But what you mean is, a woman must be alone and unafraid of her own thoughts and allowed to open any drawer. You try not to think of your mother. She wrote once, not for publication, for breath. Small journals, letters never sent, grocery lists that turned into verses. You burned most of them, as she asked. But one, just one, you kept, tucked behind the mirror in your room, folded 12 times. It contained no name, only a sentence in ink that was barely legible. Even a silent queen dreams of a door that opens. You did not know what it meant then. Now you do. The drawer stares at you. You ignore it for weeks, until one day, in the dull heat of an autumn afternoon, your tea oversteeped and your writing stuck between two thoughts, you reach for it. You do not force it. You simply press, and it opens, just like that. Inside, a bundle of pages, dusty, handwritten, old. Not your host's husband's handwriting, older, European, maybe French, maybe not. You lift the first page. It reads, "To be born into obedience is to die before your name is spoken." You keep reading. Each page is a wound stitched into prose. A woman's thoughts, fragmented, unnamed, unedited. Passages about crowns, daughters, exile, silence. And one line circled 3 times. No one asks a lamb if it agrees to slaughter. You sit down, and you weep, not for the words, but for how long they waited. You include a passage in your essay, just one, no citation, no commentary. Let them wonder. You speak the line aloud at the college. A crown does not justify a cage. Some students shift, some nod, some furrow their brows, as if they've heard it before in a dream. You smile. That's how it begins. Later, you receive a letter from a woman in Dublin who read your piece. She writes, "I never knew my grandmother, but my mother used to whisper that phrase, 'Even a silent queen.' I thought it was something she made up." You write back, "She did not make it up. She carried it, and so will we." Before you leave the house, You return the pages to the drawer, but you add one of your own, a letter to the unknown one. Chapter 10. The Nurse Who Dreamed of Queens. 1942. London during the Blitz. Bombs above, stories below. The hospital shakes in the night. The glass rattles. The patients hold their breath. The air smells of bleach and blood and something older, something like fear passed down. You are 23. You sleep on a cot beside the surgery wing. You eat when you remember. You write letters you never send. You've stopped expecting the sky to stay quiet. But some nights, between sirens, there is silence. And in that silence, stories rise. It started with a patient. She was old, missing 2 toes, but her mind remained clear as ice. She handed you a book, small, soft-bound, worn. "I stole this from my mother," she said. "Don't tell God." You didn't. You opened it during one of the long nights when even the bombs got tired. Inside, the queen who watched the guillotine. No author, no copyright, no biography. Just voice. A voice that didn't shout or plead. A voice that didn't ask for forgiveness or explain itself. A voice that simply said, "I existed. I bled. I remembered." You read it again after the morning's amputations. You read it in stairwells while waiting for morphine to arrive. You read it at lunch while chewing bread you couldn't taste. And one night, with your feet aching and the ceiling trembling, you reached the page with the line, "A crown does not justify a cage." You stopped. You read it again. It echoed in your chest like the sound of boots on marble. You'd never worn a crown, but you'd worn silence. You knew the shape of a cage, even when it came with a name tag and polite instructions. You copied the sentence onto a note card and tucked it into your coat pocket. You carried it into surgery. You carried it to the shelter. You touched it when your hands trembled too hard to hold a scalpel steady. One day, another nurse asked, "What's that?" You showed her. She read the line. She blinked. Then she said, "It's from the book. My aunt used to whisper that in her sleep." You stared at her. She continued. She was a printer's daughter, said it came from a queen who wrote her way out of death. Weeks later, the library was bombed. Books exploded into ash. Stories lost before they were ever heard. You wandered the rubble, found a fragment of a spine, a torn page, the word lamb still visible through soot. You cried, not because of the book, because you realized you didn't just need these words. You were made of them. You began to write in the margins of patient files. Nothing dangerous, just questions. What would you say if no one interrupted you? Who told you you had to be grateful for survival? Sometimes the women answered. Sometimes they just smiled. But one day you found a nurse's notebook open on her cot. Inside, even a silent queen dreams of a door that opens. You didn't ask if it was copied from you, or from the book, or from somewhere older. It didn't matter. It had found another voice.
Chapter 12. The Professor Who Told the Truth. 1982. West Berlin. A lecture hall where ghosts take notes. You begin every semester the same way. No syllabus. No welcome speech. No long monologue about attendance. Just a quote. You write it on the board slowly, in silence, with a chalk stick you sharpen yourself. A crown does not justify a cage. Then you turn around, and you wait. Some students write it down. Some glance at each other. One girl always squints, trying to remember where she's heard it before. You don't explain. Not yet. You let the silence sit. Let it grow into something they have to earn. Your students think you are sharp. They whisper that you were arrested once in '68, that you burned your own dissertation in protest, that you teach barefoot under your desk. Only 2 of those things are true. You don't correct them. What matters is not what you are. What matters is what you remember, and what you help them remember. You teach historical silence. That's what the department calls it. But you know better. You're teaching recovery. You're teaching the archaeology of erased voices. You are teaching your students how to listen for things that were never meant to survive. And at the center of every class, like a compass that always spins back to one direction, is her, the woman with no name, the queen with no court, the fire with no smoke. You found her long ago, in a train station bookstore, a slim volume wedged between books about tanks and treaties. It was marked anonymous, priced at half a mark. You opened to the first page, and there it was. She signed with silence, but history carries her name in blood. You didn't buy it. You stole it. You still don't feel guilty. You spent years piecing it together. Fragments in pamphlets, footnotes in banned texts, half-remembered quotes from students in Prague. Underground journals passed hand to hand like lit matches. You gathered them all. And in time, you saw the pattern. The story wasn't linear. It was cellular. A code passed woman to woman, life to life. Not in names, but in lines. No one asks a lamb if it agrees to slaughter. Even a silent queen dreams of a door that opens. To be born into obedience is to die before your name is spoken. You tattooed that one on your rib cage. No one has ever seen it, but you feel it every time you breathe too deeply. One year, a student asks you after class, "Do you believe any of these women ever actually existed?" You look at her. You see the scar behind her ear, the way she curls her fists when she's nervous. You answer, "I believe we did." She blinks. "We?" You nod. "We are not the echo. We are the original voice finally returning." You begin a project, not a book, too static. You design an archive, dynamic, growing, digital and living. You name it Heretical Inheritance. You upload every fragment you've ever found. Invite others to do the same. No login, no copyright, no gatekeeping. Within a year, it has entries in 23 languages. Within 2, 4,000 users. Within 3, a quote from the archive is read aloud at the UN Commission on the Status of Women. You watch the video from your small apartment. They say the quote came from a medieval source. You laugh. She's still walking through history like she owns the damn place.
Chapter 13. The Student Who Stood Up. 2013. Tehran. A borrowed book. A locked room. A voice that won't die. You are 19. You are not supposed to read what you are reading. Not here. Not now. Not as a girl. But you do. You sit on the tiled floor of your cousin's room, door locked, windows drawn, and read aloud to the silence. Your voice trembles at first, then it does not. The book has no cover. Just a cloth binding, soft with age. Inside, fragments, margins, pages translated and retranslated. The title is handwritten on the first page. Even a Silent Queen. No author, no introduction. Just a quote circled in faded ink. She opened the door with no key, because the lock was never real. You read it again. You feel the air shift, as if someone is listening. You found the book in a box of old textbooks, thrown away, water damaged, forgotten. But you kept it, because on the inside back cover, someone had written, "If you're reading this, then she reached you. Let her speak through you now." You didn't know who she was, but you knew. She was real and dangerous. You start copying passages into your notebook, not with pen, with thread. You embroider them into your scarf. At first, it's only for you. Tiny stitches, invisible unless you're close, a secret. But secrets grow teeth. In class, your professor speaks of revolution, of language, of silence. You raise your hand. He looks at you like he's never seen your face before. You ask, what if the silence is not submission, but the sound of something sharpening? The room goes still. He does not answer. But later, someone slips a note into your book. She lives in you now. You know who they mean. You don't know their name. You don't need to. You begin to speak, in poems, in pamphlets, in chalk across bathroom tiles. You write the words others whisper. A crown does not justify a cage. And below it, even a scarf can carry fire. Then comes the protest. You are not the loudest. You don't carry a megaphone. But you wear your scarf with every quote you've stitched into it. And you walk, straight-backed, eyes open, voice calm. They detain you that night. No charges, no explanations. Just cold metal on your wrists and a room with no windows. They ask questions. Who gave you the book? Who wrote the quotes? Chapter 14. The Archive That Remembered You. 2021, New York City. A server room, a forgotten file, and a resurrection. The air is cold here. Not from weather, but from hum. Server towers blink in silence. Rows and rows of humming metal. A data graveyard that breathes. You're the intern, the invisible one. Your badge doesn't open the executive doors, but it opens the basement. You're tasked with digitizing miscellaneous holdings, scans from boxes no one's opened since email was a novelty, pamphlets, diaries, memos. Women's studies overflow from the 80s and 90s. You spend your days converting their dust into pixels. And one afternoon, between two pamphlets about textile strikes, you find her. It's not a full book, just a folder. Inside, scans of handwritten letters, clipped quotes, blurry photos of yellowed paper. One document is titled, "The Inheritance of Silence, Fragments from She Who Signed with Nothing." No author, of course. Just quotes. So many quotes. Your eyes blur as you scroll. You've seen some of these before. Graffiti in subways, stenciled on protest signs, whispered in digital threads during movements that flare and vanish. But here, you see them all together. For the first time. A lineage. A voice spliced across centuries. You begin to cry, though you're not sure why. Maybe it's the ache of recognition.
Maybe it's the shame of forgetting something you never had the chance to remember. One page changes everything. It's a scan of a note, handwritten, slightly slanted. A line. They burned the woman, but not the words. The words keep walking. Beneath it, an old academic sticker from a university archive. You search the database. No match. So you go rogue. You dig through restricted files, old grants, uncatalogued donations, a scholar's name you vaguely recognize, fired in 1989 for refusing to redact a publication. Her files were boxed, never destroyed. Your breath catches. You request access. And wait. 2 weeks later, a dusty librarian wheels out a cart. Didn't even know we still had these, she says. You nod, smiling politely. You don't tell her your hands are shaking. You don't tell her you've seen this handwriting before. Inside the box, proof, letters, transcripts, photographs of student notes, bathroom walls, banners, all quoting her. Her. Still no name. Still no origin. Only echoes. And then, at the bottom of the box, you find it. A pressed flower. Faded. Fragile. Taped to a torn page. And beneath it, scribbled in pencil. She was never alone. She was always becoming. You build an archive, not one for dusty boxes, a living one, online, decentralized, encrypted, free. You call it She Who Signed with Silence. You scan everything. You invite others to contribute, and they do. At first, a trickle, then a flood. Someone uploads a scanned scarf from Tehran. Another adds a classroom photo from Berlin. Someone else submits audio of a nurse reading aloud in a British accent, recorded in 1943. Each item includes a tag. Origin unknown. Author many. Source lived. One night, you receive an email. No subject. Inside, just a single sentence.
Chapter 15. The Flame You Left Behind. 2025. Somewhere. A screen, a whisper, a girl who listens. You are 15, or maybe 25. You could be older. You could be barely born. It doesn't matter. What matters is you're tired, and the world is too loud. So tonight, you put on your headphones. You scroll past the noise, the algorithms, the wars, the men with microphones who never ask if you want to listen. And there, buried beneath makeup tutorials and politics, you find it. A thumbnail, muted colors, an old painting of a queen. Title: How Queenly Misery Sparked the Fight for Women's Rights. You tap it. The voice that speaks is soft, but not small. It tells you a story of a girl sent across the sea, of a marriage she didn't choose, of a wedding night she didn't understand, of silence stitched into velvet, of a sentence written in the dark. I do not consent. The voice does not shout, it does not cry, but it grows. With every chapter, you hear the fire build. A maid who remembers, a philosopher's wife who writes in secret, a nurse who reads by candlelight while bombs fall like punctuation. You pause halfway through. You stare at your ceiling. You whisper the line that keeps returning. A crown does not justify a cage. And it sounds like your own voice for the first time. You go to bed with the echo in your chest. The next morning, you search for more. You find the archive. You scroll. It's endless. Images, quotes, scarves, pages, graffiti, audio files labeled anonymous, unknown, still breathing. You click submit. You don't know why. You don't have anything to add. Or maybe you do. A photo from your grandmother's room. A napkin where your aunt once scribbled a line at a wedding. A text your sister sent when she left home. No more cages. I'm done. You upload all three. The confirmation message reads, "Thank you. The flame continues." You don't become a historian or an activist or a martyr. You become you. But you carry her in your pocket, in your breath, in the space between heartbeat and decision. And one day, someone will ask you, "Where did you learn to say no?" You'll smile and answer, "It wasn't a lesson, it was an inheritance." Because the woman who signed with silence never wanted to be remembered by name. She wanted to be remembered by every girl who opened her mouth and found herself. Now it's your turn. Write it down. Say it. Stitch it. Whisper it into the next generation. Because the fire is not in the books, not in the pages, not in the archives. The fire is in you, and it always was.